Hello everyone and welcome to my first episode of Tips and Tactics for the third-person shooter Loadout. In this episode I will be discussing how to build effective rocket launchers and understanding what launcher builds will maximize your specific playstyle. If you're a new player in Loadout, the weapon crafting menu can be quite daunting, so let's go ahead and start there by breaking down some of the basics. There are currently 4 types of chassis. The launcher chassis, which I'll be covering today, the rifle chassis, the pulse chassis, and last but not least, the beam. Rocket launchers currently have the most customization options and as a result provide the most room for error when trying to build weapons and maximize your performance and your playstyle. That being said, they also offer the best options to absolutely humiliate your opponents by using more difficult and more unique weapons to attain kills or complete objectives. Basically, if someone in the game hasn't seen the weapon that you're using and you're doing well with it, everyone's going to ask about your weapon. You're going to be the cool kid on the block. And there's a couple major points you want to consider when building a rocket launcher. First and foremost, if you have difficulty aiming, tracking targets with a sniper or rifle, and that's been traditionally your pattern in all of shooting games, rocket launchers are probably going to be your best option in Loadout to deal damage to opponents. The AoE splash damage is pretty forgiving, and it's enough to provide some leeway for newer players with less accuracy. You also want to try to utilize and learn how to use advanced movement. Using advanced jump maneuvers like dive roll jumps, which add extra height, or ramp jumps, which also add extra height, or just getting a vertical tactical advantage over your opponent in general is vital due to the height advantage that you'll have over opponents. It's much easier to aim at a target that's on the ground while you're in the air than a target that's in the air with a rocket launcher. Although mid-air rockets are absolutely amazing, I wouldn't recommend trying to go for those all the time. Now let's go ahead and get to the individual parts and pieces. We're going to go ahead and skip over the stock because I don't really think it depends that much on a rocket launcher. It's pretty much going to go where you shoot it. So let's go ahead and start with the scopes. There are 2 very unique scopes. The others pretty much do all of the same things. Iron sight is the basic default one that you're going to have on your grenade launcher, but there's 2 more advanced ones that can be used quite effectively. First off is the laser guidance. It's arguably the most effective scope for rocket launchers because it allows you to steer your rocket while you're aiming down your sights. Now this needs to be coupled probably with jump boots, or again, if you're using those advanced jump maneuvers and you have quick enough reaction to steer your rocket as you're in the air. But that ability to steer it almost minimizes the risk that you're going to have of not dealing damage, depending on a couple other circumstances. The other cool and unique scope is the remote control, which allows you to assume control of the rocket as it flies through the air. You're going to be vulnerable while you're flying that rocket, of course, but it can be good on certain game types like Death Snatch and Jackhammer, depending on your location on each map. Now, if you're playing Jackhammer, you're probably going to be on defense. I don't think it would be wise to be trying to move offensively with a remote control guided rocket. Now, for barrels, they're pretty straightforward. They're single barrel launchers all the way up to hexa-barrel rockets. Single barrel launchers dish out the most damage but have longer reload times. Multi-barrel launchers can dish out sufficient damage when they're paired with burst triggers or charge trigger. They can also be spammed in choke points to deny enemies from advancing. That's typically how I use multi-barrel rocket launchers if they're using full auto or semi-auto. All triggers can be utilized effectively depending on your rocket build, so there's not much to add here other than maybe the charge trigger. It works very similarly to Unreal Tournament. If you hold down your trigger button, it will charge up the rocket. So this is very good for multi-barrel rockets, and then you'll get one big jump on your opponent if you can fire them all at the same time. So you can get some pretty good burst damage from charge triggered rockets. As for payloads, you really got to pick your poison here. Slug will dish out the most direct damage, while Tesla and Pyro can be nice alternatives depending on the situation. If there are a number of shielded players in a game, try using Tesla rockets because Tesla has an extra damage bonus for shielded opponents. It will pop those shields really quickly. If there's too many beams, try out the Pyro launchers. Power launchers are typically cause a burn effect to last longer if you're using a stronger launcher. So if you have a single barrel, the burn effect that happens afterwards will last longer because that damage is going to be greater on a single barrel versus a multi-barrel. So kind of some options that you have to pick between payload. Now healing and buff also very good depending on the situation, but we're going to get to those when we get to talk about dispersal. Now propulsion, probably the most important part of the launcher. New players should take note here. Pay attention. The faster your rocket travels, the less damage output it will have on your weapon. So rockets can also be shot out of the air. So it's very important to understand what rocket speeds will yield results that you want and expect. If you want to quickly deal damage, but not necessarily have your rocket shot out the air, maybe turbo is right for you. Maybe rocket propulsion is right for you. If you want to do some heavy damage, but you're probably going to have to get a little bit closer so they don't get shot out of the air, agile or super slow might be your cup of tea. Now there's also several others in there that offer very different styles of propulsion types. There's scuttle and corkscrew. Very infrequently used because of their odd behavior, but is supplemented by increased damage. Scuttle travels along the ground, while corkscrew flies through the air in a corkscrew pattern, making it more difficult to shoot down and kind of confusing to your opponents. If you can effectively master those propulsion types, you can be quite troublesome in most game modes. Now for shells, they can definitely completely change the way you're using a specific rocket launcher build, but it's really dependent on your style of play. Impact is probably the best direct damage dealing to your opponents. Very standard. Once you shoot it and it connects with any object, it's going to explode. Bouncing and rebounding, if you're about trick shots, you may enjoy the bouncing or rebounding shells. Basically, when you shoot it, it will bounce off of whatever surface it fires off of. So this is good down long corridors, again for area denial, I mentioned that earlier, or in some cases, it's very good with light laser guidance because you're able to rebound your rockets and they will still converge to wherever you have your target painted. The last one is the sticky. This is very good for mines. Particularly, I think this is best utilized on jackhammer. If you're playing defense, you mine up around the your jackhammer, your flag, so to speak, so that it makes it more difficult, more tedious for players to run through your area, your base. You also want to consider using the manual or proximity detonator to maximize your effectiveness. Speaking of detonators, I typically stick with the contact or manual detonators on my rockets. Contact is good for on the ground splash damage, while manual detonator is good for dealing with mid-air opponents. Proximity could arguably be the best type of detonator because it allows you to fire and forget. However, you should note that the damage penalty for proximity is significantly greater than the other available options. Proximity also doesn't unlock until tier 2. The other option there is timed, but it's very hard to figure out what scenarios that would be best utilized for. You can try it out for yourself and kind of test, but I didn't have too much success with the timed detonator. Dispersal, there are 3 types. Explosive is the best option for dealing direct damage. You'll want to utilize this detonator if you're going for direct enemy player kills. There is cluster, which is probably the most difficult to use and understand. It can be effective at area of denial, which is an option to consider for the game mode jackhammer. Possibly also can be utilized for blitz as well. Flak is a fantastic utility and support dispersal. Probably provides the best option for anti-rocket or anti-air support. If you're going up against opponents that are absolutely dominating with the rocket launchers, you might want to try out or have at your disposal a flak rocket with hexabarrel preferably. When you pair this specifically with the manual detonator trigger, you'll be able to literally cripple opponents that rely heavily on rockets to help out your teammates. This is best utilized on the game mode Blitz, where your teammates will be in a centralized location and splash damage is so critical. Flak can also be an incredible tool for healing a group of teammates clustered together. Again, for the game mode Blitz, this is probably where you're going to see the benefits of this the most. That pretty much wraps it up for this episode. I've included some weapon builds that you guys can check out, as well as some gameplays to my secondary channel annotated on the video. If you enjoyed this, make sure to like and subscribe for future videos, and I will catch you guys later. Peace.